I want you, the listener, to picture something with me for a second. Imagine you are a global media titan, like an Emmy Award-winning producer, a talk show host, a game show host, a radio personality.
Right, basically the absolute peak of what we define as success and security today.
Exactly. You are a billionaire. You've got top-tier private chefs, elite personal trainers, infrared saunas installed in your home, the absolute
Yeah,
works.
you have every conceivable resource right at your fingertips.
But behind closed doors, your reality is this total physical collapse. You are secretly surviving on a desperate, miserable cycle of slamming 2 5-hour energy shots a day just to keep your eyes open through a television taping.
Which is terrifying when you think about the toll that takes on the nervous
No,
system.
it gets worse. You are strapping this claustrophobic, restrictive CPAP machine to your face every single night because your body is literally forgetting how to breathe in its sleep. And your blood panels, just a total disaster zone. You're suffering from 5 out of 5 clinical markers for metabolic syndrome.
Yeah, so you are, for all intents and purposes, a sinking ship outfitted in a very expensive, custom-tailored suit.
That is the perfect way to put it. And today, we are looking at the exact blueprint of how that man, comedy and media legend Steve Harvey, managed to pull himself back from the brink of that metabolic disaster.
It's such a fascinating case study. We see this terrifying juxtaposition a lot in longevity circles, actually. This public-facing persona of boundless electric energy masking a private reality of profound cellular exhaustion.
So true. We are pulling from an incredible source today, a profound conversation documenting his radical 70-day health transformation, guided by human biologist Gary Brecka on the Ultimate Human platform.
And this source material lays out, in highly clinical and sometimes just completely hilarious detail, the exact lab results, the dietary shifts, and the grueling biohacking routines he used.
Right, routines that allowed him to literally reverse his biological age at 66 years old.
And we should establish immediately, this is not like some surface-level celebrity wellness trend. This is a masterclass in cellular biology.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive isn't to just marvel at a billionaire's customized health protocol. We want to demystify this terrifying trap called metabolic syndrome.
Which is quietly eroding the health of millions of people who honestly think they're doing everything right.
Exactly. We want to give you, the listener, the exact scientific principles and the accessible, completely free everyday alternatives that you can use to reclaim your own cognitive focus, baseline energy, and longevity. You do not need a Hollywood budget to leverage human biology.
I mean, this specific case study is vital because it perfectly illustrates the failure of the standard Band-Aid approach in modern medicine. Treating symptoms in isolation simply does not work for systemic cellular issues.
Right, it's like putting a bucket under a leaky roof instead of fixing the hole.
Exactly. What Harvey's journey reveals is the life-altering power of abandoning generic health advice and instead customizing your protocol based on your specific genetic data.
So we have to set the stage by taking you back to Harvey's breaking point. Because this whole transformation didn't kick off in some pristine wellness clinic in Miami. It actually started in a hospital bed in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, he was out of the country working his usual punishing schedule, and he just felt utterly depleted.
He heads to the Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, and the true extent of his bodily collapse is laid bare on the lab reports.
And we really need to analyze his baseline here because it highlights a massive misconception we all harbor about health and effort. Harvey was not ignoring his body.
Not at all.
Right, he wasn't sitting around eating junk food all day.
Far from it. I mean, during the COVID lockdowns, he actually did one of those intense delivered-to-your-door diets. He dropped 25 pounds in 21 days.
Which sounds impressive until you look at how he did it.
Yeah, he achieved it through severe intermittent fasting, eating only within an 8-hour window, and aggressively restricting his intake to just 1,000 calories a day, plus sweating in saunas and working with a trainer.
Yet he felt worse than ever. And when we look at the physiology of severe caloric restriction, the reason is obvious.
Why is that? Because society basically tells us to eat less and move more.
Well, starving a grown man of his stature on 1,000 calories a day forces the body into a catabolic state. The body perceives a famine.
Oh, right. Panic mode.
Exactly. To survive, it elevates cortisol, which signals the system to start breaking down amino acids in muscle tissue to convert into glucose for the brain.
And the source material reveals the devastating result of that biological panic mode. When he finally stepped on an in-body machine which uses bioelectrical impedance to scan your body composition, he learned a terrible truth.
Yeah, a full third of the 25 pounds he lost wasn't fat. It was precious, metabolically active muscle mass. He was left with under 100 pounds of skeletal muscle on his frame.
Which is just crazy for a guy his size.
It is an absolute disaster for longevity. I mean, muscle is your metabolic currency. It's the largest site of glucose disposal in the human body. It stabilizes your joints, dictates your resting metabolic rate, regulates insulin sensitivity.
So when you cannibalize your own muscle tissue, you're essentially tearing down the engine of your car to use as fuel. You might weigh less on a scale, but your metabolic engine is ruined.
Which perfectly explains the cascade of issues they found at that hospital in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, the doctors ran comprehensive tests and just handed him this laundry list of diagnoses. An overnight sleep study revealed a sleep apnea score of 29, which is classified as severe.
Severe is almost an understatement. That means his airway was collapsing, causing him to stop breathing or gasp for air 29 times every single hour.
And his poor wife Marjorie couldn't even sleep because she was lying awake, terrified he was just going to suffocate right next to her.
Well, when your airway collapses 29 times an hour, your body is effectively drowning all night long. The nervous system panics, dumps massive amounts of adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream just to jolt you awake enough to take a breath.
So you're spending your nights in a fight or flight state instead of actually repairing cellular damage. Add to that, he had high blood pressure. He was diagnosed with leaky gut. His red blood cell count was dangerously low, meaning his tissues were suffocating for oxygen. And his vitamin D level was sitting at a critically low 19.
Yeah, for anyone tracking their blood work, 19 is basically half of the lowest acceptable end of the normal range.
But the text emphasizes that all of these individual crises were just symptoms of the overarching pathology metabolic syndrome.
Right. Metabolic syndrome isn't a singular bug you catch. It is a cluster of biochemical dysfunctions happening simultaneously that drastically amplify your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes.
And to be clinically diagnosed, you only need to present with 2 of the 5 clinical markers. Steve Harvey had all 5.
He had high triglycerides, elevated insulin, elevated fasting blood sugar, severe abdominal obesity, that dangerous visceral fat, and depleted HDL cholesterol.
Like you said earlier, he was batting 1,000 on the markers for early mortality.
He really was.
It's like trying to fix a sinking ship by bathing water with a teacup while ignoring the massive hole in the hull. But here's my question for you. If a billionaire with every resource available and the discipline to starve himself on 1,000 calories is failing this badly with standard advice, how is the average person supposed to stand a chance?
What's fascinating here is that wealth doesn't equal health literacy. The standard medical solutions offered to Harvey perfectly encapsulate why people feel so helpless. The doctors prescribed blood pressure medications to artificially dilate his blood vessels and a CPAP machine to forceful pump air down his throat.
Which he absolutely despised. He tried every configuration, the nasal pillows, the face strap. It was just claustrophobic and miserable.
But consider the mechanism there. They are entirely palliative. A beta blocker manages the symptom of hypertension, but does absolutely nothing to address the systemic inflammation or insulin resistance causing the vessels to stiffen.
And the CPAP prevents suffocation, but doesn't shrink the fat in the neck, crushing the airway. The medical paradigm wasn't asking why his engine was failing. It was just chemically muffling the check engine light. I want to pause here and speak directly to you, the listener. How often do you accept mid-afternoon exhaustion or poor sleep as just a normal part of aging?
Or a normal consequence of a busy schedule.
Right. We tell ourselves, well, my job is demanding, of course I need an espresso at 3 p.m. We normalize this dysfunction. Harvey was normalizing needing 2 highly caffeinated synthetic energy shots just to film an episode of Family Feud.
We excuse these red flags because everyone around us is experiencing the exact same decline.
Yeah.
But chronic exhaustion is a glaring cellular signal that your internal environment is compromised.
So realizing that his current regimen of 32 random daily pills and starvation diets was destroying his body, Harvey demanded a complete paradigm shift.
And this brings us to that crucial 48-hour window where he threw out the generic playbook and looked at his DNA.
Yeah, he found his way to Miami to see human biologist Gary Brecka. Within days, they pulled his genetic data. And shockingly, he already had this genetic test sitting unread in his medical files for years.
Which happens so often, no traditional doctor had ever interpreted the genetic variations for him.
But when they cross-referenced his DNA with his blood work, the revelation was staggering. Instead of taking handfuls of random pills, Harvey began supplementing for his specific gene deficiencies.
Because taking generic supplements is essentially firing a shotgun into the dark. People take magnesium or vitamin C because a blog post said to, but they have zero data on what their unique biological machinery is genetically incapable of producing.
The prime example of this from the sources is what I'm calling the cyanide B12 revelation. This completely shifted my perspective on energy drinks.
Oh, this is a huge one.
So Harvey was surviving on these 5-hour energy shots, right? But his genetic tests reveal he lacks the specific enzymatic ability to process the primary active ingredient in those shots, cyanocobalamin.
Let's break down that biochemistry, because the prefix cyano is the dead giveaway. Cyanocobalamin is a synthetic, lab-created form of vitamin B12. It's incredibly cheap, which is why it saturates the energy drink market. The B12 molecule is literally attached to a cyanide molecule to stabilize it.
Wait, actual cyanide?
Yes. For a large portion of the population, their liver can metabolize this.
Yeah.
It uses antioxidants to cleave off the cyanide, excrete it, and utilize the B12. So the liver has to basically disarm a tiny bomb just to get the vitamin.
But Harvey's genetics meant his liver couldn't even perform that cleavage process properly.
Precisely. His methylation cycle was compromised.
Yeah.
So by slamming those shots, he was flooding his system with a synthetic B12 he couldn't utilize, tethered to a mild toxin his liver struggled to clear.
Giving him a massive artificial spike followed by a debilitating crash, she was actively poisoning his own metabolic pathways.
Exactly.
That leads directly into another massive revelation. And this revolves around something we see on grocery shelves every single day. Harvey's body fundamentally could not process folic acid.
This is a critical distinction for millions of people, particularly those with MTHFR gene variations. We have to separate folate from folic acid. Folate is a naturally occurring B vitamin found in dark leafy greens, lentils, avocados. Your body knows exactly what to do with it. Folic acid, conversely, is a completely synthetic chemical compound synthesized in the lab.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Folic acid is omnipresent in America. If you look at standard bread or pasta, the packaging proudly declares it's enriched or fortified.
Right, which sounds incredibly positive.
Yeah, Harvey even joked about this. He said, enriched sounds like a luxury. Fortified sounds like it's making you stronger. It's brilliant marketing. But for someone with Harvey's genetics, eating fortified bread is essentially creating a toxic roadblock in your bloodstream.
The mechanism there is fascinating. When you consume synthetic folic acid, your body has to convert it into a usable form using an enzyme called DHFR. The human liver has a very slow, limited capacity for this enzyme. If you have a gene mutation, that capacity is even lower, so the unmetabolized folic acid just circulates in the blood.
It's like trying to unlock a sensitive door with a key that's cut almost perfectly, but not quite. It jams into the cellular receptor keyhole, the cell doesn't get the nutrient, and now the real, natural folate you eat can't even get into the cell because the key is jammed in the lock.
That is a perfect analogy. And as the source text explicitly details, human biology has a strict protocol for dealing with foreign substances. It cannot process, it stores them. It shuttles these synthetic chemicals into fat tissues, burdens the liver, and triggers a chronic immune response that manifests as systemic inflammation.
This brilliant billionaire was eating enriched foods, assuming he was making decent dietary choices, and his own biology was stockpiling those synthetics as inflammatory waste.
Right, directly contributing to his leaky gut, brain fog, and all that visceral fat. This is the core principle of gene deficiency supplementation. It's not about taking vitamins because an article said they're healthy. It's about reading your body's unique code.
Once his team swapped out the synthetic cyanide B12 and folic acid for bioavailable forms his body could actually absorb, his cellular engine finally had the correct fuel. Which gives you, the listener, a massively actionable takeaway today.
Absolutely.
Go to your pantry, turn over your food labels, look at the ingredient list on your bread or your granola bars. If you can't pronounce an ingredient or if it explicitly says folic acid, throw it in the trash. Real food doesn't need an ingredient list. A piece of fish has one ingredient fish.
It's an elegant rule. If an ingredient reads like it was formulated in a chemical plant, your digestive system is going to expend massive amounts of energy trying to neutralize it.
But fixing the genetic gaps was just step one. To clear out the metabolic chaos, Harvey had to go to war with the most socially acceptable drug in the modern diet.
Refined sugar.
Yes. Harvey committed to a 70-day complete lifestyle overhaul. He was restricted to a paleo-style single-ingredient diet, grass-fed meats from Amish farms, organic vegetables, and zero dairy, zero beans, and zero wheat.
I want to isolate the removal of dairy and beans because it directly addresses his leaky gut diagnosis.
Yeah, I understand removing wheat because of the synthetic flour, but aren't beans supposed to be a staple of longevity diets?
Under normal circumstances, yes. But the gut lining is only one cell thick, held together by tight junctions. When those junctions become permeable, macromolecules of food slip into the bloodstream. The immune system flags them as foreign invaders.
Ah, causing more inflammation.
Right. And the proteins in dairy, like casein, and the defense proteins in beans, known as lectins, are highly abrasive to a damaged gut lining. You can't heal the microscopic perforations if you keep rubbing sandpaper over them.
So he pulls the sandpaper away. But the true demon for Harvey was his sweet tooth. He had this deep love for pies, cakes, peach cobblers. The source text explicitly links high sugar intake to Alzheimer's and dementia, referring to them as type 3 diabetes.
The clinical perspective on neurodegeneration is shifting rapidly here. The blood-brain barrier is highly sensitive. Constant, massive insulin squeaks induce systemic insulin resistance, and over time this crosses into the brain. The brain's immune cells become hyperactive, causing neuroinflammation.
Wait, so the neurons themselves literally lose the ability to utilize glucose for energy?
Exactly. The cognitive infrastructure degrades because the metabolic pathways have been burned out by sugar. It's fundamentally eroding your neurological hardware.
The sources highlight this with a vivid, slightly horrifying anecdote from a trip to Disney World. The expert describes seeing a grandmother in a motorized scooter with a 2-liter soda, a mother whose central obesity prevents her from reaching her own pockets, and a 12-year-old boy consuming a deep-fried funnel cake covered in powdered sugar, washed down with a 64-ounce big gulp.
We really need to dissect the biochemical reality of what that 12-year-old is subjecting his cellular machinery to. That funnel cake is heavily processed. Bleached white flour, deep-fried and highly oxidized seed oils like canola oil, which integrate into cell membranes and cause deep cellular inflammation.
Plus the massive dopamine-triggering sugar hit.
Right, and the big gulp is delivering a lethal payload of high-fructose corn syrup directly to the liver.
It's a staggering amount of metabolic damage. But let me push back here. Is this really just a lack of willpower, or is the food supply actively working against us?
Oh, it is unequivocally the food supply. Sugar and artificial sweeteners aren't just designed to taste good. They are chemically engineered to ding the dopamine receptors on the back of your tongue, creating a chemical reward system identical to hard drugs.
Harvey's own story proves this. When he was homeless, surviving in his Ford Tempo, his go-to meal was a Coca-Cola and a moon pie. He said the sugar hit would have him buzzing, gripping the steering wheel, but 2 hours later he'd be pulled over on the shoulder, practically unconscious from the crash.
The physiology of that crash is violent. The pancreas dumps huge amounts of insulin to clear the toxic sugar levels. But it overcompensates, so your blood sugar plummets into reactive hypoglycemia. The result is lethargy and a brain screaming for another dopamine hit just to pull out of the crash.
It's a vicious cycle. He used to drink Tropicana orange juice every morning and wondered why he felt so groggy. He was putting himself into a mild diabetic coma to start the day.
Which brings up the hemodynamic aspect of digestion.
Yes. I want you, the listener, to consider your own afternoon energy dips. When you hit a wall at 2 p.m., is it really a lack of sleep?
Often it's a systemic blood flow crisis. The human body operates with a fixed volume of blood. If you consume a lunch heavy in refined carbs and sugar, the body must divert massive amounts of blood into the gut to handle the inflammatory burden.
So the blood is quite literally rushing to your stomach to digest the food instead of staying in your brain to drive cognitive focus. You are suffocating your brain to digest your lunch.
Precisely. The brain fog isn't a lack of caffeine. It's a localized lack of blood flow to the prefrontal cortex.
Unbelievable. But once Harvey corrected his fuel source, his energy levels skyrocketed. But to truly bio-optimize his body and shed the final metabolic markers, he had to embrace severe physical discomfort every single morning.
This transition into purposeful hormetic stress is where the most profound biological remodeling occurs.
Right, the extreme biohacking routine. And I have to point out, Harvey acts like he pioneered this, but he admits his wife Marjorie was years ahead of him. She had the red light beds and oxygen bags, and he used to roll his eyes and call it stuff for old people until his lab data forced him to wake up.
Resistance to new modalities is strong until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change.
His multi-step morning routine is intense. First, an amino acid drink to preserve muscle while working out fasted, then under-the-tongue supplements, and then the dreaded cold plunge.
The physiological crucible.
He does it daily for 3 to 6 minutes in water between 50 and 58 degrees. He admits it sucks every single time. He even wears his underwear because the physical reaction is so jarring he can't bear to look at his own anatomy.
The immense physiological shock of cold water immersion cannot be overstated.
There's this hilarious anecdote where Stephen A. Smith calls Harvey after trying a plunge, calling it a near-death experience, and says he's going to cheat and use 70-degree water. And Harvey just berates him, telling him 70 degrees does absolutely nothing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the insistence on 50 to 58 degrees comes down to thermogenesis. When your core temperature drops, your brain registers an immediate threat of hypothermia. To survive, it activates brown adipose tissue or brown fat.
Which is different from regular fat.
Right, very. Brown fat is packed with iron-rich mitochondria. When activated by extreme cold, it begins ripping through your stored white fat, burning it at a highly inefficient rate purely to generate heat for your vital organs.
So nothing burns calories or shifts the nervous system quite like total submersion in freezing water. It forces a massive release of norepinephrine, sharpening focus and triggering cold shock proteins that protect the brain.
But there is a profound philosophical concept here, too. Aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
Wow. Let's unpack that.
Look at modern life. As we get older, our primary goal becomes engineering discomfort out of our existence. Soft mattresses, perfect climate control, food delivered to our doors. We systematically remove every minor physical stressor.
We wrap our biology in bubble wrap.
And the consequence is devastating. Human physiology evolved to adapt to harsh environments. Intermittent, acute biological stress makes the organism stronger. When you remove all stress, your cellular machinery basically goes to sleep. By forcing himself into 50-degree water, Harvey is telling his cells, we are not safe. Adapt. Survive.
But I have to push back here. He follows the plunge with 15 minutes in a 95% oxygen bag, a red light therapy bed, and a PEMF mat to restore cellular voltage. This is fascinating, but who has the money for a commercial ice machine, red light beds, and oxygen bags? It sounds like true health is walled off for the elite.
That is a highly valid concern. But the source material provides exact budget alternatives that leverage the same biological pathways. You don't need expensive toys to trigger the adaptation.
Okay, so what are the accessible alternatives? How do I get brown fat activation without a $5,000 plunge pool?
Run a standard bath with cold tap water. Stop at a gas station and buy 2 bags of ice. Dump them in, use a cheap laser thermometer to hit that 50 to 58 degree mark, and submerge yourself. Or simply turn your shower to completely cold for the final 3 minutes, letting it hit the back of your neck where brown fat is stored.
Now what about the expensive red light beds?
Get 45 minutes of early morning low-angle sunlight on your bare skin. It regulates your circadian rhythm and costs nothing. And instead of clinical oxygen bags, learn free breathwork techniques to hyperoxygenate your tissues.
So the true barrier isn't money, it's a willingness to endure the discomfort, which challenges you, the listener. Where in your life are you aggressively pursuing comfort to your own detriment? Taking the elevator instead of the stairs? Reaching for the sugary snack because sitting with fatigue is too uncomfortable?
The discomfort itself is the medicine.
And this immense turnaround wasn't just about fitting into suits tailored by his frustrated stylist, Ellie, who hilariously survived only 51 seconds in the cold plunge, by the way.
Right, being aesthetically fit doesn't mean you have metabolic resilience.
Exactly. It was about gaining the energy to execute a massive philanthropic vision. Let's look at the stunning results. In 70 days, Harvey's body fat dropped to 810.6%. He gained 1.2 pounds of muscle. His vitamin D rocketed to 96. His sleep apnea completely vanished.
And most importantly, he went from 5 out of 5 metabolic syndrome markers to exactly 0.
0. This newfound vitality immediately bled into his business, partnering with a Harvard scientist to create Elevate You, a daily greens powder to combat brain fog, now sold in Walmart. But the true emotional core is the Stephen and Marjorie Harvey Foundation.
Yes, the 1,600-acre ranch in Georgia. Marjorie mixes privileged and underprivileged girls to foster mutual understanding. But Steve's focuses on the boys.
Haunted by the thought of boys growing up without fathers like he had, he bought this massive ranch from Chick-fil-A. He flies in fatherless boys from single-mother homes for a week of training, mentorship, and fishing.
And he specifically uses the optimal plastic worm lure.
Yes, he uses fishing to break down their tough exterior walls and teach them patience and vulnerability. The ultimate goal is to build dorms and a STEM center to sleep 300 kids at once.
Regaining his health wasn't just about living longer. It was about expanding his toolbox. When you aren't fighting your own biology, you have the bandwidth to build legacies and pull others up.
It's incredible how changing cellular biology ripples out to affect hundreds of fatherless teenagers on a ranch in Georgia.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you? We looked at a guy trapped by generic health advice and sugar addiction who bio-optimized his body through genetic-specific supplementation, single-ingredient foods, and the daily embrace of physical discomfort.
And you don't need a private chef or a ranch. Reading labels to avoid folic acid, ditching refined sugar, and shocking your system with cold water are completely within your grasp. You just have to decide if you want to be a passenger to your genetics or the driver of your health.
We learned today that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. But consider this, if our modern world is entirely engineered to make us comfortable, with instant food and effortless entertainment, are we actually paying for that convenience with our lifespan? Look around your life today and ask yourself, what is one uncomfortable thing I can do today that my future self will thank me for?